President Trump's Middle East peace plan was unveiled this week. Will it bring Israel and Palestine to the table? Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will tell us in an exclusive interview, followed by analysis with Middle East expert WALID PHARES. And attorney and commentator Joe DiGENOVA is here to unpack the impeachment trial of the president and what it means for the next executive. Plus, Donald J. Trump becomes the first president to address the March for Life. What effect did it have in the pro-life community? President of the March, JEANNE MANCINI, is here with reaction. The world over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Great show for you tonight. Mike Pompeo, WALID PHARES, Joe DiGENOVA, and JEANNE MANCINI are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover. Let's begin. President Trump, amidst his impeachment trial in the Senate, unveiled his proposal for a new path to peace in the Middle East. In an effort to end decades of bloody conflict in the region, the plan includes a blueprint for a Palestinian state, as well as a 4-year freeze by Israel on settlements in the West Bank. The president made the announcement at the White House alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Here is in an exclusive interview is U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. We sat down with the secretary earlier this week at the State Department to discuss the plan, his expectations, and much more. Mr. Secretary, first of all, thanks for having us in. Tell me about this deal of the century as it's being sold. Now, the Palestinians are their noses are out of joint because though they have a capital in East Jerusalem, they don't have control of the holy sites. How do you get the Palestinians to the table? They're rejecting this deal as of right now.
Well, thanks for having me on. What President Trump laid out today is historic. It is the first time that there has been a detailed, factual map. It's the first time there's been 80 pages of detail about what this might look like, a real offer, something for the Israelis who have now said, yep, we'll negotiate, and something for the Palestinians to consider. This is a big step forward in its own right. We see in the reactions across the region, there are many who are thoughtfully saying, let's take a look, let's evaluate this. This preserves the Temple Mount and the status quo. It ensures Israel will always be secure. It provides an opportunity if the Palestinians will stop their terror and their funding of the martyrs, Hamas, if they'll disarm Hamas, if they'll do these things that are simple. These are things we ask of every nation state. If they'll do those, the Palestinians have an opportunity to have a state for themselves. This is a real offer based on both the history of the Holy Land and the reality on the ground today. This is a good opportunity to really change the nature of the relationship between these people who have been so challenged for all of these years to figure out how to get peace and prosperity as between them.
My vision presents a win-win opportunity for both sides, a realistic two-state solution that resolves the risk of Palestinian statehood to Israel's security. As everyone knows, I have done a lot for Israel, moving the United States Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the Golan Heights, and frankly, perhaps most importantly, getting out of the terrible Iran nuclear deal. Therefore, it is only reasonable that I have to do a lot for the Palestinians, or it just wouldn't be fair.
What do you expect him to do for them? Is this an opening offer?
So this is a vision. And when you have a vision, you expect an offer to be responded to by a counteroffer. I would fully expect that the Palestinians would, and the Palestinian people will, debate this. They'll discuss it, and they'll consider. I hope that they will then decide that they want to enter into negotiations based on that. And if they do, right? So part of this is that there is land designated that for 4 years, the Israelis agree they will not settle this land. They will hold this open for a Palestinian state, conditioned on the Palestinians doing some basic things.
I want to read your response. This is Senator Leahy, who said, this diminishes the prospects for peaceful coexistence. He said it's a roadmap for annexing settlements and territory and indefinite occupation while creating the mirage of a future Palestinian state. Your reaction?
Well, there'll always be cynics and critics. But I can say this, there have been lots of plans come before this. And there have been those who have just said, let's keep the status quo. President Trump didn't find either of those acceptable. He said, let's work, let's come up with a vision, let's set a roadmap which creates an opportunity for a secure Israel and a Palestinian state with enough detail that the parties can evaluate whether this is something that makes sense for them. Well, we hope that they both will, and we truly believe this reflects the reality that we are living in today in this incredibly special place in the Holy Land.
Well, I went back and read Yitzhak Rabin's suggestion, his offer. It's very similar to this roadmap. It's not dissimilar. It was a state, a partitioning of the East Jerusalem. This is the two-state solution that everybody for a long time have wanted. We'll see how it progresses. Now, I know you're on your way to the UK. The administration warned Boris Johnson about allowing Huawei, that Chinese company, to build out their 5G network. They decided to do it. Your message to the UK today, and how might this impact our intelligence sharing with the UK going forward?
So I haven't seen precisely what they decided to do. It's been a busy day. But we are unambiguous about this. American security, your privacy, my privacy, our information won't flow across networks that are at risk of being having that data taken away by the Chinese Communist Party. Huawei is, in fact, an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. They have a requirement to share information that they have with the state of China. We'll have to evaluate what the United Kingdom did, how their decision was made, what the ramifications of that decision are. And I hope Prime Minister Johnson and my counterpart, Dominic Raab, are prepared to work with the United States to ensure that there are viable pathways for the world's information to pass across trusted networks, including trusted networks inside the United Kingdom.
You and Congress warned the UK about this and said there would be penalties if you allow this company, this Chinese company, access to your information highway, 5G network. What might those penalties be?
So we've talked about the fact that American information, American national security information will not be permitted to pass across networks that we can't trust. So we'll have to evaluate what they did. We'll have to go take a look at how these networks will interact with information that flows. I haven't seen what the solution was that Prime Minister Johnson put forward today. We will look at it. The National Security Team here will look at it. And the American people should know we'll make sure that we do the right thing with our information. And we'll always encourage such close, wonderful partners like the United Kingdom to make sure they get their systems right as well.
There have been a lot of questions raised in recent days in connection with the impeachment trial about Ambassador Yovanovitch and her being dismissed. In all the questioning, could you clarify for the public, every ambassador serves at the pleasure of the president, correct? So if an ambassador is not fulfilling the duties of that president or following the directives of the given State Department at the time, they can be relieved of their duties, correct?
Well, I'm also mindful that every Secretary of State serves at the pleasure of the president. And when I lose the president's confidence or the president's trust, or for the reason that the president thinks there might be someone that can perform these functions in a way that is more consistent with how he wants his Secretary of State to do that job, the president has every right to say, no thanks, Mike, I don't need any more of your time. Thank you for your service. It's true for every one of our ambassadors, for every political appointee. These are the president's people tasked with executing the president's mission. And the president not only has the right, but frankly, as the individual who was elected by the American people, to make sure he is comfortable, confident, and has trust in all of those being asked to execute his foreign policy.
Final quick question about the peace plan. I know a lot of our viewers are very concerned about the safety of those holy sites, those sites associated with Christ, King David, the Old Testament. Are those sites protected and guaranteed under this peace deal?
They are. There's no change in the status quo for the holy sites or for the Temple Mount itself.
Okay.
You've been there, I've been there. These are amazing places shared by the Abrahamic faiths, and we are determined to make sure that the security for those places remains intact so that all people of all faiths can travel there to be part of this really special place.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, sir.
With analysis
Appreciate
of the peace plan and his thoughts on the Secretary Pompeo interview, I'm joined by Middle East expert and former advisor to the president, Dr. WALID PHARES. He joins us from Florida. WALID, this plan has been seen by many as favorable to Israel, but not so much to the Palestinians. Now, as mentioned by the Secretary there, this is a first offer. What do you expect the Palestinian counteroffer to look like?
Well, first of all, it's very important to understand that as a first offer, it calls for a counteroffer. That's the philosophy of the whole plan of the deal of the century. It's a plan in the making, in progress. I've spoken with actually advisors to President Abbas in 2016, 2017. They were expecting something like that, maybe not the map that was showed by the president, but they had concerns, obviously, about the whole process. And I think that this first deal ensured, at least on the map, two things. Number one, Israel was concerned about security. It got this border in the map that would separate Israel from Jordan. The Palestinians were very concerned, and I heard them telling me this many times, about the link between the West Bank and Gaza. Guess what? A tunnel was offered. It's an unhinged tunnel. I mean, you could use it, and there is no problem with it.
Right.
But of course, the other issues will have to be discussed: refugees, Jerusalem, and many other matters.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about that. Now, the maps of this plan have been drawn up by the U.S. and Israel, basically. And as you mentioned, they don't give the Palestinians everything they wanted. There is a proposed West Bank Gaza tunnel, but the Jordan Valley, the Israelis would get control of. There's no East Jerusalem capital here. Actually, it's in Abu Dis, which is about a mile outside of Jerusalem. Is that a deal breaker for the Palestinians?
It is ideologically, but then when the Palestinian negotiators or people in government will take a look at it and will understand that they will have an administrative capital in a suburb which is attached to Jerusalem called Abu Dis, but something else. They're going to get Arab neighborhoods inside East Jerusalem. So the idea that they're not getting East Jerusalem, they're getting part of East Jerusalem. And by putting those two parts together, they have an administrative capital. Let me mention one thing. Egypt is moving its administrative capital from Cairo. People wouldn't believe this, to 100 miles away because of practical considerations. So at the end, they will have a capital. It will be connected to Jerusalem, but not to all of Jerusalem.
Now, some critics are saying, you mentioned it a moment ago, the refugees are not settled in this plan. But we have to point this out, and I think it's critical, because I've been hearing about this for so long, WALID, so very long, that this is the first time that Israel is accepting a Palestinian state, and we shouldn't dismiss that. How big a deal is that for the Palestinian territories?
It's probably less important than Jerusalem because of the high symbolism of Jerusalem. But at the same time, if they are attentive to what has been offered was not you bring the refugees first, there will be chaos, and then you create a state. You create a state first to which the refugees will be coming to, and of course they will have many options. Some would like to settle in other places, some would like to emigrate, but those who really want to come and join the Palestinian state, they have to have a Palestinian state. And once it is established, then there are those billions and billions of dollars to help them settle in the new Palestinian state.
Well, I want to show you the reaction in the Palestinian territories to the plan. They don't look very happy here, WALID. You see the rioting in the streets and the burning of things. Yet Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, the Emirates, they're all urging Palestine to come to the table. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas yesterday sent a letter to the Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel saying, quote, the plan is an American and Israeli disavowal of the Oslo Accords. And so the Palestinian Authority now sees itself as free to disregard the agreements with Israel, including security cooperation. Could this plan destabilize the region, and should they come to the table?
First, these are the first reactions, and they were expected, of course. But let's understand one thing. You have two types of Palestinian politicians. Those who will never accept neither this plan or this map or any other map, these are the Hamas camp. And the Hamas camp is linked to whom? To Iran and to Hezbollah. That's a different story. But then you have the Palestinian mainstream of Mr. Abbas, and in the beginning he's going to reject that. But of course he's going to negotiate and talk with whom? With those who support him in the Arab world. You just mentioned the most important ones. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Jordan to a certain extent. But of course you see Oman and Bahrain. So when Arab coalition partners will meet with the Palestinians and will guarantee them that they're going to be with them in the development of that new Palestinian state, they will start moving in a different direction. Now they are concerned about who? Who is the concern of Mahmoud Abbas? Hamas. Because they're going to accuse him of being a traitor to the Palestinian cause, so on and so forth. Look, let me give you one example from history. Ireland. It did not jump from under British colonialism to an independent state immediately and sovereign state. It went through phases. And the Palestinians have a great model in how the Irish people have moved along to obtain their independence.
There are economic incentives, as you mentioned earlier, for the Palestinians to make this plan work. $50 billion to fund Palestinian infrastructure for jobs, etc. Now, many Palestinians are saying this is an insult. Is it?
No, because many Palestinian businessmen I met in 2016 and 2017, guess what they were trying to tell me? Why wouldn't the United States be granting donations to the next Palestinian state? So those who are in charge of the economy were seeking this, but at the same time, the radicals will do everything they can to sink the whole process. And besides, $40 billion, Raymond, does it suggest something? It's almost a third of the Iran deal money, $150 billion,
right,
for a very small piece of land, versus Iran, $150 billion. I would recommend that the Palestinians will reconsider and then will engage in the negotiations. Not easy. It's going to take some time, but the base exists. I would seize that opportunity.
One of the precursors to acknowledging the statehood of Palestine is to control Hamas, disavow Hamas and disarm it. Can the Palestinians exert that kind of control over Hamas?
Look, I have been pushing for that matter and advising for that matter for the last many years, both lawmakers and, of course, leaders. Without getting the PA, the Palestinian Authority, with the backing of the Arabs to control Gaza, Gaza is the coastal area of the new Palestine, Palestinian state. You cannot fly with Palestine without having Gaza. So yes, there need to be a dissolution of the armed forces. I'm not talking about political parties. They're free, even if they are Islamists. That is crucial. The problem is, to resolve this, you have to go all the way, guess to where? To Tehran. Tehran has the key, because Tehran is funding and training Hamas. Hezbollah is training and funding Hamas. So what we have been doing with our Arab partners was to resolve the issue there, and that would have great consequences on the Palestinian issue.
I want to ask you about, it's a little bit of a political question. Your thoughts on why people in Middle America, why should they be concerned about this peace in the Middle East? And why is the president expending so much effort, years, to try to bring these sides together with this deal?
Well, in a post-9/11 era, in a post-ISIS era, in a different world after the Cold War, the jihadi attacks against the United States, you cannot ignore what is happening in the Middle East. You can ignore, but then suffer the consequences. And what we're going to do is do it at the lesser price possible in terms of people's lives and treasure at the same time. So if we help resolve this issue, if we help resolve some of the other issues that are pending in the region, I would say, Raymond, that this is not the only big deal that we are going to be cutting in the Middle East. This is the first one. Look at what's happening in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, the minorities issues, the Kurdish issues. This is just the first model. If we are successful there, we may be successful elsewhere.
I want to talk about a couple of other matters. You heard Secretary Pompeo and I discuss his trip to London. Now, he's asked the Brits to reconsider that decision to allow the Chinese company Huawei to build their 5G network. Might they reconsider? Should they?
I think they should. I think we are their strategic partners, especially now after Brexit more than ever before. But that reminds me of what happened with the British and the Europeans with regard to the Iran deal. You remember President Trump spent a lot of time also convincing them that we cannot stay in the Iran deal because it's a threat to our security. But you guys have economic and financial interests, your companies, at the end of the day. So something very close is happening now with Huawei. We consider that the Chinese will use Huawei, and I think that's a good argument to do intelligence on us and our allies. And in Britain, of course, you have financial interests with these companies. But with time, I think the British, especially this government, will understand that it's much better to be in line with their allies, the United States, who are always there at their side when there are strategic security problems. So it's going to take dialogue between us and the British to resolve the matter.
Before I let you go, I just want to focus once more on this peace plan. They're calling it the plan of the deal of the century. It is the first time, it seems to me, that Israel is willing to accept a Palestinian state. This is the two-state solution in many ways that people have been asking for. Your thoughts on why it took so long and how Trump could be uniquely positioned to bring it to some sort of completion?
Couple of points quickly, Raymond. What is unique about it is that what we've heard from one part of Israel, the left-wing Labor government in the past, they have accepted two-state solution, while the Likud and the right wing have never accepted that. So now President Trump was able to convince those who were not convinced. So now he has Israel united, at least around the idea of two-state solution. And number two, the Israelis have an interest in resolving the matter because they and the Arab coalition have a much greater threat coming to both of them from Iran. The president encouraged the Arabs to drive terrorism out, is encouraging Israelis and Palestinians to find a resolution because all of us, we are going to be heading towards a massive challenge with the Iranians, and that challenge has started already on the ground in Iraq.
Well, as I mentioned to the Secretary, this looks a lot like Yitzhak Rabin's plan right before he was assassinated. This is sort of the plan he had proposed with the Palestinians.
That's absolutely true. I have been in the Middle East and here for many decades. The plan existed, different maps maybe, but this is the definitive map. Let me say one last word. The map reflects demographics on the ground. There is no cheating here. This is where the Palestinians live. This is where the Israelis live. This is the best way to put it together. But again, the Palestinians have the right and should be very aggressive in negotiating, but they should negotiate.
We'll leave it there. Dr. WALID PHARES, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow WALID over at Twitter at WALID PHARES. The impeachment trial of President Donald Trump dominated the media landscape in the U.S. Senate this week. Now, White House counsel Pat Cipollone and his team made their case for acquittal, while the House managers, Democratic House managers, repeated their arguments that the president had to be removed from office. Joining me now with analysis of the trial and what precedent it could establish is political commentator and former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DiGenova. Joe D., thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
What a pleasure. Now, this week, really, we saw a lot of pressure being applied to those four moderate Republican senators trying to get those witnesses to the fore. They want more witnesses. It looks like that effort's going to fail. Nancy Pelosi said without witnesses, new witnesses, this acquittal is not authentic. It's a fraud. Your reaction?
Nancy Pelosi has become an anarchist and a seditionist. She is undercutting her own case that she sent to the United States Senate. She's telling the Senate, my case isn't worthy. So if you acquit the president without more witnesses that aren't mine, it's not an acquittal. This is an assault. This is a deconstruction of the United States Constitution by Pelosi. I'm going to repeat. She is acting in a seditious way, in a subversive way. She has no right to do that and say that. That is a disgrace. This is her case. This is what she sent. This is what they speeded up so they could run it over there after they held it for a month so they could prepare their infomercial. What you've seen for the last 2 weeks from the Democrats is a slickly prepared political commercial. They repeated it over and over and over. And
with
the reason,
slides and video, and they even had I couldn't believe the book.
Extremely professional, very well done. And of course, the problem with it is, it's where's the beef? It's all bread. There's no meat in the bread.
Do you think that's why she delayed handing the articles over? They were producing the.
Yeah, no, that was the clear reason. And I give them credit, was to prepare all of this slick presentation stuff. And it was very, very nice. I liked it as a television person who watches. I thought it was beautifully done. It lacked only one thing, substance. And because the two articles of impeachment are completely ill-founded under the Constitution. And here's the other thing about it. Schiff has a way of being really nasty. He doesn't like the people on the other side. He tries to demean them. It's a Saul Alinsky tactic. Demean, besmirch. undo the people on the other side, make fun of them, ridicule them. He did that with Alan Dershowitz. He said Alan Dershowitz is a criminal defense lawyer. He did that purposely. He didn't want to call him a constitutional scholar, which Alan clearly is. So that shows you the mentality of the prosecution. I think they've failed miserably. And by the way, my heart simply leapt when I saw that lawyer, the guy, Eric, I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He was from the firm in New York. When he deconstructed the Biden family on the second day, it was brilliant. I was riveted. I couldn't believe it. And I said, this is the Rubicon. They have crossed it. This case is over. And this case is now about the Bidens.
Yeah.
It's not about Trump.
But the Democrat managers brought up the Bidens.
They opened the door, and I said, hallelujah. They've opened up. All they did from the beginning was talk about the Bidens and how they didn't do anything wrong. The answer to that is, oh, yes, they did.
I got to ask you about John Bolton, the former national security advisor. This book spills onto the pages of the New York Times, at least presumed excerpts. Now, the book alleges that the president told Bolton in August of last year that aid was withheld from Ukraine to force them to investigate the Bidens. But around the same time, he told Radio Free Europe the conversations between the two countries were warm and cordial. How credible is John Bolton?
Well, this is a sad moment for me. I've known John for almost 40 years, and I think this is an act of treachery. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's sad. I think it's embarrassing for him, not the president. Who knows what happened in a conversation? This president says lots of things, and you know what? It doesn't matter what he says, constitutionally or legally. What matters is what he does. He gave them the only lethal aid they ever got. They got no lethal aid from the Obama administration. What did they get from Trump? Everything they wanted. So, and ask yourself this question. This is the point that settles the case against John Bolton. There was no reason to release this book now. The reason you know he wanted it leaked and he wanted it out before the verdict was because he had the book for publication before the verdict. You don't do that to a president that you work for, even if you don't like him. It's unprofessional, it's unseemly, it's sleazy, but more than anything else, it's disloyal.
Now, Simon & Schuster, his publisher, as well as his agents, claim they did not leak it. I will point out, this is the same publisher and agents that represented James Comey, and they leaked to the same reporters.
Yada, yada, yada. Here's what they said. They used a very interesting choice of words, very legal. The publisher denied that it coordinated the leak. They used a very careful word. I don't know what that means. That's like abuse of power. Tell me what it means. They didn't coordinate the leak. I think they leaked it. I think the publisher leaked it. And who knows, they might have done it in conjunction with somebody at the NSC. They might have helped the people at the NSC who were villainous.
Who were reviewing the document
say, hey,
to
we
make
can get this out for you. Who do you?
Nothing
And we have
classified
someone
was
to
there.
take it. Is that okay with you guys?
I got to ask you about Alan Dershowitz. You raised him a moment ago. Now, he had what some are calling a rather unusual take on quid pro quo regarding the president's actual or perceived intentions on that perfect call. I want to get your take on this.
As a matter of law, does it matter if there was a quid pro quo? Is it true that quid pro quos are often used in foreign policy?
If a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
So he went on to make the case that if the president does something that's in the common good of the country and it helps him politically, there's nothing impeachable there.
It's an unimpeachable statement. I must say that everything that Alan said is 100% true, and I love it because what's great about it is that it's blatantly true. I mean, let's take for example how Barack Obama says to President Medvedev, "Please tell Mr. Putin, just wait till after the election. I'll have more flexibility." Well, I might have been offended by that, but it wasn't an impeachable offense. It was stupid. It was corrosive. It was embarrassing to the United States. It made President Obama look like a lackey of the Soviet Union, and more important than anything else, it made him look subservient and weak.
But a lot of people are taking Alan Dershowitz to the woodshed for this commentary. Mostly scholars and, you know, those in the scribbler class.
Scholars. I
Your
met one
reaction?
once in an alley. They're hard to tell from the thugs.
You think this is all politically motivated?
Oh, this is clearly politically motivated. I'm sure people like Lawrence Tribe at Harvard, the guy who always wanted to be on the Supreme Court and never will be. It's wonderful. It's like Hillary not being president. It's thrilling to me that she wakes up every morning totally depressed because she never was, never will be president. But Alan Dershowitz is being attacked by all the people who made the exact arguments under Clinton that they're now making now to go after Trump. I mean, this is all silly. This is, you know what this is? This is faculty lounge arguing. They're all idiots, except for Alan. He's brilliant. Because he's on my side.
I got to tell you, just from a theatrical point of view,
oh, he's great.
He dominated the room.
Yeah.
He asks the rhetorical questions, hand in the pocket. He's answering his own questions. He looks at the defense. He ruled the room. They can all take lessons from Alan Dershowitz. Just style.
And let me just tell you something. The president's team, from top to bottom, has been spectacular because they had a plan. And the plan was destroy the prosecution, but more importantly, make this case about the Bidens. And they have succeeded immeasurably.
Okay, I want to play this for you. This is Adam Schiff, the manager for the Democrats. And he pushed hard for witnesses really all week long, particularly John Bolton. Here's what he argued this week when asked about witnesses and the president's motivation for asking Ukraine to investigate corruption.
There's no way to have a fair trial without witnesses. And when you have a witness who is as plainly relevant as John Bolton, I would also add in response to the last question that if any part of the president's motivation was a corrupt motive, if it was a causal factor in the action to freeze the aid or withhold the meeting, that is enough to convict. It would be enough to convict under criminal law.
Is the president's motive enough to convict under criminal law? How do you figure out his motive?
Alan, Adam Schiff is a very silly man in a very important and momentous moment that he and the nutsos in the House created for the American people. And he's just dead wrong, and he knows it. But here's what Schiff has done. He and Pelosi and Nadler have subscribed to the Joseph Goebbels theory of government, which is government by propaganda and the big lie. This case is the best example of the Nazi big lie that you could ever find. A false case against an honorably elected president of the United States, trying to dethrone him, not because of anything he has done, but because they do not like him, because the person that they wanted didn't win, and they don't like the fact that he's accomplishing so much for this country. The truth is, these folks on the Democratic side, they just don't like America.
You mentioned the congressional inertia. The president brought this up at a rally in New Jersey. Listen.
While we are creating jobs and killing terrorists, the congressional Democrats are obsessed with demented hoaxes, crazy witch hunts, and deranged partisan crusades. It's all they know how to do. The do-nothing Democrats.
Joe, I was amazed this week. The president signed the USMCA. Now, whether you like him or don't like him, this is the biggest trade deal maybe in the last 30 years.
Yes.
It's bipartisan. It's a major landmark legislative accomplishment that he accomplished with the Pelosi House. Signed this thing into law. It got no coverage. They were covering Lev Parnas walking from Union Station to the Senate, trying to get a ticket to watch the impeachment trial.
The mainstream media and the Democratic Party are one and the same. Regrettably, the American media has surrendered its right under the First Amendment to pretend to protect it. They are spending it. These are wastrels. They have taken the gorgeous currency of the First Amendment and they have misspent it. They have wasted it on hate for the president. It's a very sad thing. When I was a little boy, I was 12 years old. My parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I said I want a subscription to the New York Times. I have had the New York Times since then, all my life. I have never been more disappointed in an institution than the New York Times. They are a trendsetter, and the trend is very, very down.
I want to play this for you. This is White House counsel Pat Cipollone in his concluding remarks this week, where he called for the end of this trial. Watch.
Overturning the last election and massively interfering with the upcoming one would cause serious and lasting damage to the people of the United States and to our great country. The Senate cannot allow this to happen. It is time for this to end, here and now.
Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, and others I've spoken with this week say, no, 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 we are protecting everyone for manipulation of the upcoming election and protecting the country from an errant commander-in-chief.
With no evidence to support that, they are purveying the big lie. They have to say that. This is what they have. This is what. And now they may genuinely believe this, in which case the level of dementedness of their political positions is even more gross than I thought it was. But the truth is, this has always been about nullifying the 2016 election because they don't think he's worthy of the office, and she was. And what they've done is they've harmed the country, they've harmed the Constitution, they've wasted valuable public time on problems that need to be solved, and they've reelected him at the same time.
Joe DiGenova, thank you so much for being here. We shall talk
Raymond.
in the days ahead. Thanks again. Last week, President Donald Trump made history by being the first ever sitting president to address the March for Life here in Washington, D.C. He gave his full-throated support to the movement, presenting himself as an unwavering advocate for the unborn. Take a look.
All of us here today understand an eternal truth. Every child is a precious and sacred gift from God. Together, we must protect, cherish, and defend the dignity and the sanctity of every human life. Unborn children have never had a stronger defender in the White House.
Joining me now with reaction via phone is head of the U.S. Bishops' Pro-Life Committee, Archbishop Joseph Naumann. Archbishop, thank you for being here. I want to get your reaction to the president's appearance at the March for Life. I know you were there last week, the first chief executive to appear here in 47 years. The left of center National Catholic Reporter, far left of center, in an editorial said, quote, "The selling of the church's moral authority is complete when someone so morally bankrupt and demonstrably anti-life as Trump can command obeisance of the nation's Catholic leaders. The moral tank has been emptied." Your reaction?
Well, I think the office of the president's an important office, and his presence at the March for Life, I think, was a great encouragement to all those that stand for life. And so we don't make political judgments or endorsements, but we certainly appreciate the president's support for the life issues, and I think the National Catholic Reporter has kind of their own agenda.
No, well, they clearly they're clearly trying to conflate politics with the pro-life cause, and I think one has to be really careful whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. Look, I've had pro-life Democrats in this seat as I have had pro-life Republicans. The fact is, the people of life and the voters for life welcome them no matter the party, but they seem to be taking issue with the fact that this is a Republican who's the rest of his agenda they so despise that they can't quite stomach his being embraced by these pro-life people. And they say this is only one part of the ethic of life. Are you concerned that we have movements underway to push the right to life and defense of the unborn down in the hierarchy of issues and trying to elevate things like the environment and other issues that now are being called pro-life issues?
Yes, well, at the bishops' meeting in November, we reissued the document that we do every 4 years on forming consciences for faithful citizenship. And in the cover letter for that, we cited many of the issues that, I think Pope Francis has raised, elevated in our consciousness, particularly our care for refugees and welcoming of immigrants, the care for the poor in general, access to health care, and care of the environment. And these are all issues that matter to us as Catholics. But we reaffirmed what the bishops of the United States have said for decades, really, that the preeminent issue for us remains the protection of the unborn. And we gave three reasons for that, basically. The first, that it attacks life when it's most vulnerable, at the very beginning of life. Second, because it happens within the context of the family, and it destroys the most foundational bond, the bond between a mother and a child. Right. And then third, the sheer numbers, that 61 million abortions since its legalization in 1973, and each of those children have a mother and father that have been deeply scarred by the death of the child. So for those reasons, it remains preeminent among all the issues.
Archbishop Naumann, I thank you so much for your time. I think one has to rationally work your way through this. If you care for the poor, if you care for refugees, if you care for the environment, you don't get any of those people if they're killed in the womb before they're given a chance to be born. So it is the primordial issue, civil rights issue and human rights issue of our time. Archbishop Naumann, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Raymond.
Okay. Following his speech, I spoke to President Trump for Fox News in this exclusive. Now, here's what he had to say about his appearance. Mr. President, talking to people coming in here, they were saying you elevated this movement and that you made them feel included. Others are saying you're doing this for politics. It's an election year. When was the moment when you went from pro-choice to pro-life? Was there a moment?
Well, it was, and there was a specific moment, and it was quite a while ago, but it was something that's turned out to be even more, I think probably even more of a truth than I would have thought at the time. But it's just an honor to be here today. They have tens of thousands of people outside too, Raymond.
Yeah.
So this was their all-time record, and I think they beat it by a lot. And incredible people. They're just incredible people.
I got to ask you this. You came here and marched with this March for Life and this pro-life community for the first time in history. Why did you feel you had to come at this moment in American history?
I think it's just timing. It's under siege. Religious liberty's under siege. If you look at everything that the folks here stand for, that we're surrounded by, that's under siege. I just thought it would be good. I was here. I was in D.C. The march was going to be successful, but we made it much more successful, and I think it sets a good tone. I know now they're going to march down to the Supreme Court, right, and that'll be a beautiful thing to see. And there won't be riots, and there won't be fighting, and they're just, these are incredible people
all over the country.
And I just felt it was a great time to do it. You really are. You're bringing a lot of people together, and that's good.
Joining me now to discuss the impact of President Trump's historic speech at the March for Life and on the pro-life movement is the president of the annual March for Life, JEANNE Mancini. Jeanne, thanks for being here.
Raymond,
okay,
thanks for having me.
I want to start with, what are you hearing from people who attended the march and those across the country who saw this? 47 years of president attending is a big deal.
It's historic. I've really only heard positive things, and I was waiting to hear, a plethora of different feedback, and people have been so excited. They loved the president's speech. They loved the speech of the other people that were there, too, the speeches. So I've heard really, really positive things, but no doubt having the leader of the free world in person address the marchers was very invigorating.
Now, has he changed the game or upped the ante, if you will, for forthcoming presidents, future presidents?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, Raymond, that I've been told by White House staffers before who worked very closely with the president in previous administrations that presidents are counseled not to come to the March for Life for different reasons. They might be pictured with a graphic image photo, etc. It might not be good for their reputation. And so I really hand it to this president, this pro-life administration. He courageously leaned into this. And I'll tell you what, standing right near him, he walked out in front of the bulletproof glass a number of times and about gave a heart attack to the Secret Service.
Yeah, I figured that.
He's fearless.
A week before this event, it came up in conversation, and the president then said there was some talk about going to the March for Life. And I don't want to reveal conversations, but the concern was security. There was a big Secret Service concern, and he was kind of dismissive of it. He said, no, that's not that big a deal. We should, if we can go, it's just right there. And so he apparently made the decision to go. And some say this was politically motivated, Jeanne, that this is to seal the Catholic vote.
Listen,
say what?
Yeah, I can't read his heart. But first of all, let's just clarify that the March for Life is not inherently Catholic. We're nonpartisan. We had 3 Republicans speak on Friday, and we had 2 Democrats speak on Friday, and that's no easy feat in today's day and age. So just to kind of set the record straight on that.
2 of them from my state.
Absolutely, Louisiana is so pro-life.
Our First Lady and the Senator Katrina Jennings.
I certainly cannot judge the president's heart, but by everything that I can see, he is excited about this issue and he leans into it. In fact, much to my surprise, he called me out of the blue on Saturday to talk a little bit about the march.
After the march?
After the march.
Wow. What did he say?
Unannounced. I wasn't told by his staffers. He just wanted to talk about it, talked about how exciting it was and the young marchers, and I think just what an honor it was to be the first president to speak there.
Wow.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's curious, and as I hear you saying, look, this is a nonpartisan affair, we never hear this. And I have never heard this from the Human Rights Campaign when President Obama spoke there, from Planned Parenthood when Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton went and kissed the ring. Nobody talks about that. There's no concern about it. So why are those events apolitical, but this is considered a political move? I dismiss all of that. These are people reaching out to coalitions they agree with and moving issues that this particular politician or president agrees with. There's no, what's the harm here?
Absolutely.
I don't see the harm. I kind of agree with what Dershowitz was saying earlier. If the president sees a good for the nation and it benefits him politically, there's no harm in that. Do both.
Right.
The common good is a good thing.
Amen, Raymond. And the reverse is true. So right now, all of the Democratic candidates are totally out of touch with mainstream America, including pro-choice Americans. So for 10 years strong, 8 out of 10 Americans would limit abortion at most to the first 3 months of pregnancy, including 6 out of 10 pro-choice Americans. And all of the Democratic candidates are radically pro-abortion. They're abortion paid for by your tax dollars until birth. And that is completely out of touch with the American people. Where Donald Trump is in touch with the American people on these issues.
I wasn't going to play this till later, but since you brought it up, this is Pete Buttigieg at a town hall from Sunday. Listen to this question and the response.
I am a proud pro-life Democrat. So do you want the support of pro-life Democrats, pro-life Democratic voters? There are about 21 million of us. And if so, would you support more moderate platform language in the Democratic Party to ensure that the party of diversity and inclusion really does include everybody?
Well, I respect where you're coming from, and I hope to earn your vote, but I'm not going to try to earn your vote by tricking you. I am pro-choice, and I believe that a woman ought to be able to make that decision. Here's what But I know that the difference of opinion that you and I have is one that we have come by honestly. And the best that I can offer, and it may win your vote, and if not, I understand. The best I can offer is that if we can't agree on where to draw the line, the next best thing we can do is agree on who should draw the line. And in my view, it's the woman who's faced with that decision in her own life.
Your reaction to that?
Just completely, first of all, condescending and shocking. It just shows how out of touch he is with mainstream America, including mainstream pro-choicers even, who I wouldn't align myself with. But he's, you know, again, condescending and out of touch is how I would describe that.
No, it's amazing that, and I always say this to friends of mine, because look, I have friends who consult with Democratic candidates, and I always say, why are you ceding all of these voters to the Republican Party? Go make them fight for it. Go make a play for them. There must be some restrictions on abortion, limitations, some way you can meet them halfway. But for whatever reason, they won't do that. And I don't understand it politically.
I totally agree, Raymond. And again, this is the quote-unquote social justice party. Well, social justice begins in the womb. Social justice begins in the womb. I mean, why aren't we protecting the most vulnerable among us?
There was a moment in my interview with the president where I asked him, what was the specific moment where you became pro-life? And he kind of gave us a shorthand. I went back to the 2016 interview I did with him for EWTN. Listen to this. He goes into a little more explanation.
I want to get into some issues. Okay. You weren't always pro-life, but you now are determinedly and decidedly pro-life.
I am pro-life.
You said you're going to appoint judges who are pro-life.
Right.
You're very concerned about the late-term abortions. What was the moment that changed your thinking, your heart on this?
Well, there were a number of moments, but one was a couple that I know very, very well. And you had a strong pro-life and you had a strong pro-choice. And they argued over The mother was pregnant. They argued over the child. One, I won't get into specifics, but one wanted to abort, and the other said, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. Anyway, they had the baby. It's a long time ago, and the baby is such a magnificent person who I know, a magnificent person. And the person that was actually pro-choice is now pro-life because of it. And it had a big effect on me. But I've seen other examples similar to that, but I've seen other examples. So
it was a personal change.
It was a personal change. And, you know, Ronald Reagan made that personal change, too. Right. Many people have made the personal change. I mean, some make the personal change the other way also.
Right.
But I made the personal change, and I'm very happy with it.
Your thoughts on that? Some people disparage him and say this is just a political calculation, a turn of heart. Doesn't seem that way from that story he told, which I thought was very heartfelt and honest.
Absolutely. So I wish he'd share that with the hashtag #WhyWeMarch. So around the time of the March for Life, we try to get everyone to tell their personal stories because everyone that's at the March for Life has a story, and this is President Trump's story. #WhyWeMarch.
Yeah, well,
the stories are so convincing. They're beautiful.
I also, you know, a lot of pro-life people, when they saw the interview I did with the president, they said, you know, how can you even talk to him? And it's like, guys, redemption is possible. I thought that's part of the baked into the equation here. And I don't know, there's kind of a very, you see the partisanship at play, particularly in moments like this, which is unfortunate. And I love that the March for Life is nonpartisan. And you see Democrats and Republicans coming together around something so elementary. And, you know, to support life. Yeah. Now, you had a Marist poll that you all sponsored, an annual survey of public opinion on abortion, commissioned by the Knights of Columbus. 55% of Americans describe themselves as pro-choice, while only 40% say they're pro-life. However, the poll found a plurality. 46% want the court to reconsider Roe v. Wade in a way that would allow each state to determine its own policies restricting abortion. Yeah. Do you see this as a growth for the pro-life cause?
You know, so much in these polls is how the question is phrased, but here are the important things. By and large, the young people are pro-life. And when you look at like the government's longitudinal survey, the social survey, the biggest demographic that continues to grow more and more pro-life are young people. So that is absolutely, you know, with us and on these issues. The other thing is, unfortunately, when we ask questions of identifying as pro-life or pro-choice, you'd think that's really simple. It's kind of black and white, but a lot of people are confused. I watched this this group once, like behind a screen, a focus study, and they said, you know, I'm pro-choice, but then you ask the questions, well, really they were pro-life or vice versa. So I think that the
nomenclature is
they've
confusing.
gotten a little political and confusing, unfortunately. But the truth of the matter is that most Americans would limit abortion a lot more than it's limited now.
You have been working at the March for Life since 2012. What changes have you seen? I know you were at the Family Research Council before that.
That's right. Good memory.
What are the changes that you've seen?
Well, we've gotten a lot more engaged in social media, a lot more engaged. So we sort of lead, and especially with, again, people telling their stories, like the president telling his story earlier. And Raymond, you may have heard, but we've started a state march program. Our second annual Virginia March is going to be February 13th. We've also got one this year in Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Pretty soon we'll be in all 50 states.
Wow. What do you think Nellie Gray, the founder of the march, would have thought, having a president finally make it to the stage and to the rally itself?
Oh, I had a strong sense, more than other marches, of her intercession and her joy. I heard that she wouldn't go to the White House because presidents wouldn't come to the march. I know she did go to the White House once or twice, but after they said no, she said, I won't go unless you come. So
right.
I think it was largely her intercession.
She was a fighter.
Yeah,
no, I knew Nellie well. She was in my parish here in D.C. and was a stormtrooper in her own right. Amazing. Jeanne Mancini, thank you for being here. For more information on the March for Life and the work of Jeanne, you can go to marchforlife.org. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. You can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Why not? The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.